So today I want to talk about the digital controlled brakes of the Curado DC. Digital controlled brakes is actually something that Shimano has, and I kind of wanted to see how it performs. I've always been curious how these brakes perform in a data-like test, pretty much. I've casted this reel on the water, and man, does it really cast far. But I want to see some numbers, like some real proof that it actually can perform better. So that's why today I'm gonna be doing a test on this reel right here. Okay, so before we go into the test, let's do some theory talk. Okay, so what do we know about baitcasters so far? And from our previous videos on the Abu Garcia, so after testing that reel, I actually learned something about casting reels. There has to be a balance between the brakes that are inside and the spool weight ratio, which is how much the spool weighs. And depending on how fast it spins and how much the brakes actually affect that. Having that balance, actually, that spool to weight ratio actually can keep the reel to have a better casting consistency and distance. So really what I found is spool to weight ratio is actually key here. Overall, what I found with the Abu Garcia is that a lighter spool actually allows for a more consistent cast with multiple lure weight and actually across different environment situations. So that's what I found, but this reel is a little bit different. It has digital controlled brakes. That means that it actually is computer driven, and it actually brakes more if it spins faster, and it brakes less if it spins less. So in a perfect world, from theory talk, this is actually supposed to be one of the best reels out there, because it can actually withstand different situations, different lures, and it can control the brakes based on that. So the spool is not supposed to matter as much. Okay, so here's my test setup. I'm going to talk about four things, pretty much. The first I'm going to talk about is the max spool line. So one test I'm going to do is I always do a max spool line. And another test that I'm going to do is I call it my Light Spool Test. And what I do with that is I actually don't put on the full amount entire line, because I feel that when you actually cast in real life, I keep saying this in my videos, you don't use all this right here. And fishing bass, even if you catch 10 pounders, I don't think you're going to be using the entire spool. So with me, I'm a big believer in actually putting less line on this and making that spool lighter to actually make your fishing pretty much more consistent in the casting. So I'm going to be doing one test, full max spool, just to kind of see how that works. And I'm also going to be doing a half line spool to see how that works. Okay, so to run these tests right here, I'm planning to use this Berkeley, and that actually tells you how much the cast is. So I'll be playing with that for the distance. Lure-wise, my heavy lure I'm going to be using, let's put this aside really quick, is River to Sea Rover. I find that this right here is one of those lures that I can actually bomb pretty far, just because the weight transfer in the back, it just flies out there like a bullet. So 3/4 ounce weight, real life test. My next one is, this is more on the heavier side. This is like a solid hunk of weight. This is a live target, pretty much it's a casting spoon, and I mean it's all weight. It just flies out there, so this is a good one as well. I'll try that too. And then also I'll be throwing a 3/8 ounce. I think this is a 6 cents lure. And then on top of that, I also want to throw light, because I want to see the range of this, the capabilities of this reel. So I'm going to be throwing a 1/4 ounce Strike King lures. And this is pretty much, I feel, what you would normally throw for bass. I mean, I know some people throw 1 ounce. That's kind of rare, but pretty much these are the typical weights that I would see people throw for bass. Okay, so for the rod setup, I'm going to be throwing a Maxim 610. That's one of the rods I have. And the maximum weight for that is it's around in the 3/4 ounce weights. So I figure that's perfect for throwing this guy and this guy. Now these lighter lures, that maximum rod could throw it, but technically in my experience with throwing those, I feel like it's a bit too stiff to throw these lighter lures. So instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be throwing my own rod, one that I actually created for the 3/8 lipless and also the 1/4 ounce. I feel like it casts better this way. It's actually a rod made by myself. I call it the Goddard Ultimate BFS rod, made by yours truly. It's MHX, 12K high modulus fiber, 57 million modulus blanks. Pretty much that means it's stronger and it's lighter and it's more sensitive. It's paired up with Torazite guides, so technically it's going to be flying out there with, frictionless pretty much. So that's what I'm going to be using to throw these, just to kind of give it its maximum distance. Curado DC stock test, throwing 3/4 ounce weight. stock, half-ounce lure. DC stock cast, 3/8 ounce with my rod. Okay, so I just got back from the Curado DC casting test, and in the green is the stock test data, and the yellow is the modification test data. And looking at the stock test, I can say that the Shimano digital control brakes is working. Their market with the DC is that it's digital control. That means that when there is a heavier mass spinning and the brakes need to kick up higher, it does work. That's why I think in the 3/4 ounce, in the 1/2 ounce, it actually kicked in, and that's why it didn't cast as far. However, when it comes to throwing lighter lures, it didn't need as much brakes. So as a result, I think that's probably the reason why it actually let less brake on the spool, and that's why it probably casts further. I don't know why, but the data shows here that it's across all of them. It casts steady across all of them. Now for the modification test, what I did was I actually took off half the spool, and that made the spool a lot lighter. I found that very interesting because when it came to the light lures, the 1/4 ounce and 3/8, it didn't cast as far as stock. I find that very interesting because with bait finesse, you always want to have a light spool because lighter spools actually cast light lures farther. In this situation, it didn't work that way. I'm thinking because the digital control brakes has something to do with it. So yeah, but I also find interesting that when it came to the heavier lures, the modification test made the DC cast farther. That to me was kind of interesting. I don't, maybe because the spool was less, it actually had less brakes, and that's probably why it allowed to cast farther. I don't know, but these are my results. Okay, so in conclusion, everything about this reel is great. The price range at $250 is affordable, in my opinion, considering you're getting pretty much Shimano's micro module gears, DC brakes, Shimano quality. You cannot beat Shimano quality. Just feels sturdy. It just feels good in the hand. Pretty much everything does have its weaknesses, though. I'm not going to say this is the one-stop shop for anything. I don't believe that's the one-stop shop for anything. In fact, there's situations where I wouldn't use this, and there's places where I would use it. Pretty much the only thing I would say that I find an issue with this reel is that its size. Given that DC reels pretty much only comes in the 150 size, to me that's a little bit bigger. To me, standard is 100. This makes the reel feel bigger. This is my personal preference, though. I feel most comfortable throwing something like the Curado 70. That just tells you what my preference is, pretty much. My hands, they're pretty much not that big, you know. And the thing is that I'm not a really big guy, so my hands aren't that big. And to me, I feel more comfortable throwing a 70 size reel. That's where I can pretty much feel a good grip on my reels. If I'm throwing jerk baits, it's a perfect size, perfect weight. But with this bigger size right here, technically, I don't really like that part because, you know, I bought this reel because, you know, I fish for striper, and something about stripers is sometimes there's a lot of wind and you're throwing jerkbait, and sometimes you throw some lighter jerkbaits because that's what they want sometimes. And with this right here, that's why I bought the DC, to kind of handle that rough conditions. But what I find is pretty much using jerkbait, you're always having to move your hand like this. You're always like just jerking it like this, I guess. And this thing right here, after jerkbaiting for honestly like 2 hours, you can feel it. I don't care how strong you are. It does put some strain on your hands as well, because it's just a little bit bigger. You don't really have that much good of a grip on the rod as much. So you know, you're just working it, but at the same time, it does build fatigue in the hand. So with that being said, though, this is why I find that this rod has a specific use for it. Pretty much this reel, it could be used for casting anything, small, large, crankbaits, swim baits, Senkos, jigs, pretty much anything with any size. The DC can control it. However, personally, this is my personal preference. I use this reel for bigger lures that need bomb casting, okay, and fish with little wrist movement. So you're throwing big swim baits, jigs, where you're not jerking his hand so much like this. I will use this reel. It bomb casts really far. It's really good, okay, and that's what I would use it for. You know, you just throw it out there and you just pretty much reel it back in. Crankbaits is when you want to cast it out there and you just want to reel it in. Perfect for it. Swim baits, those kind of things. But if you're working something like always working, jerk baiting, fluke, those kind of things, I would actually use like a Curado 70. It doesn't cast as far, but you know, it just feels lighter. You can work longer with it. That's my personal preference. Should you buy this reel? This, in my opinion, is a must-have. At its price points and abilities, if you don't have one, you have to buy it. Pretty much, you just can't go wrong with Shimano. Yeah, so that's my final conclusion to the Curado DC. So there it is. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and let me know what gear you would like to test, or would like me to test moving down the road.